Welcome to the Wake Up Call podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Hopkins. By day, I work in corporate, but I have an obsession with all things personal development. So I became a life coach and started this podcast as a way to help others break free from living a life that's good on the outside and wake up to the one they actually want. When I got to my most uncertain place, all I wanted was someone to say, "Hey, Alicia, you're a little off course, and this is what you need to do." That's what I want to be for you. This podcast is a place where I want to share my experiences and provide you with community, knowledge, and inspiration to make change in your life. Sometimes we get a little lost and need help course correcting. If this sounds like you, you're in the right place. Let this be your wake-up call. Now let's get started. Hey guys, and thanks for joining me for another episode of the Wake Up Call podcast. So today we're going to talk about something that may make you feel a little resistance. It's a conversation around re-examining our relationship with alcohol. So I don't know about you, but I have definitely found myself in the place where that nightly glass of wine is, call it the reward for making it through a stressful day at work or managing homeschooling your kids, right? I think that during 2020, 2021, so many of us have found ourselves in this place where alcohol is maybe taking more of a center stage role in our life, that it's in our lives with more frequency. Maybe we used to just drink on the weekend, but it's somehow snuck into your daily habit, right? Because that's what it really boils down to, is it becomes a habit when you're doing it every single day, right? The other thing of it though is questioning this idea, right? When you go to get that glass of wine, what are you really looking for? You're looking for release. You're looking to relax. And in this conversation you're about to hear, Molly Ruggere, who's the founder of Counterculture Club, which is a global alcohol-free community based in Charlotte, North Carolina, she has us thinking and reframing those thoughts around what are we really looking to get from alcohol? You know, I think that for a lot of us, the story we have around giving up alcohol means that you have a problem with it, right? That somehow you just have to be an ultimate fuck up, right? Like lose your job, lose your money. But what if having a problem with alcohol was just that it's keeping you from your fullest potential, right? I know for me, I have definitely re-examined my relationship with alcohol for a variety of reasons. It makes my anxiety worse. It makes me just feel a little meh, a little off the next day, right? A little fuzzy. And this is all from drinking a glass or two of wine at night. So maybe redefining what a problem is and also taking away this, we kind of glamorize alcohol, right? And look, I'm the first to say I will absolutely still have wine. Like it is still something that I do in my week. I'm not saying that we just all have to make a pledge to be sober right away, but I do think it's worth asking yourself the question, what are you seeking from that glass of wine that you may be having every night, right? That you've put it on this pedestal to be this reward or this, stress reliever. And what if we started believing that we in ourself were capable of bringing us to that feeling without relying on something outside of us? So this conversation with Molly is, we're going to learn a little bit more about her story of how she came to the decision of giving up alcohol, what prompted her to start Counterculture Club. But she's actually a coach too, and helping other people reduce alcohol from their life. So I get to pick her brain and ask her the questions of, how do we move away from that nightly glass of wine? Because it's hard, right? Like I can tell you myself, I have gone weeks that I don't drink, and then I have weeks that I drink every single night. I think we all do, right? So I'm excited for you to hear this conversation. If you have found yourself just wanting to take a look at what is your relationship with alcohol? Why are you using it? What could life be like without maybe having it on a regular occurrence? So I hope you enjoyed this episode. And without further introduction, let's go ahead and jump into it. Well, Molly, I'm so thrilled to be connecting with you today. And I was hoping we could start with you telling us a little bit more of, your story and what caused you to rethink and reevaluate your relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, so my story with alcohol started out, I didn't really start drinking until I would say I got to college. I drank a couple times in high school, but my friends just didn't really drink. I don't know if I just wasn't in the popular crowd or what it was, but I only experimented, a couple times in high school, and then got to college and had the pretty typical college experience, lots of binge drinking and parties on the weekends. But I was, a high achiever in school. I was getting really good grades. I was doing like 8 internships and working and all of these things. So, I would have kind of silly experiences, but also sometimes scary experiences. But my friends and I would just sort of laugh them off, and it would feel really normal and like so college that nothing really gave me any pause or cause for concern, even though like looking back, there were some dark moments that were not healthy or normal, but in the context of college, it was all good. So then I moved to New York City after graduating, and I lived there in my 20s for about 6 years. And there was a slow progression of my drinking in New York, mainly because in that city, there's really like no rules. Like the social guidelines are just kind of different than you might find in other cities. Like the bars stay open until 4 a.m. and I worked in PR. So it was an entertainment PR, and I worked at a couple different magazines. So we'd go to these events and there'd be free drinks, and drinking during the week became normal. And if anything, my drinking was picking up in my 20s rather than slowing down post college. And it was the context of where I was and what I was doing. And so it felt, again, like totally normal to stay out till 4 and go to work the next day. And just over time, my tolerance increased, the amount of drinking I did, the frequency increased, but it was still very social for me. And I've always had social anxiety. So drinking was like my secret sauce to feeling confident and being able to talk to guys and making new friends and building instant bonds and connections with coworkers. And I just loved it. Like it just solved all my problems, it felt like. And I grew up with parents that had cocktail hour. And so I also saw it as like sophisticated and, watching Sex in the City, like cosmopolitan and what you did in your 20s, essentially. I didn't know anybody who wasn't drinking in a similar way to me in my friend circle. But it kind of started to slowly change, and it started to make me uncomfortable, my reliance on drinking, and also, again, like my tolerance just going up. Like I would drink before going on dates to have my friends and I called it like a personality drink. So I'd have a drink before I go on a date. And it wasn't really until I had a bad, pretty traumatic breakup with someone in 2017 that I started drinking out of guilt and shame. And it was mainly about like the guilt, shame, and stress that my drinking had sort of brought into my life. And so I would tell myself I wouldn't drink that night. And then by the end of the day, I'd be walking home from work and I'd pick up a bottle of wine. So I was drinking pretty much every night at that point and crying and calling my mom. And it just like wasn't fun anymore, but it was like what I needed to do to cope. And it was the best tool I had in my toolkit at that point. So it really wasn't a conscious choice. It was just like a survival mechanism for me. And it got me through the day. And then, my family started to notice I was just deeply unhappy. I hated my job. I was the winter in New York City, which is just like blistering cold, windy, walking to work in the snow, like just was not the best time. And I was really depressed. I had been prescribed an antidepressant, but I wasn't taking it because I heard you can't mix alcohol with that. So I chose the depressant of alcohol instead of the medication my doctor prescribed. And something just had to give. And my family, I had been able to hide the level of issue that my alcohol use was causing me for years, but it started to become like more apparent that it was causing problems for me. I just like couldn't keep it together and like kind of pretend like all was well anymore. So they suggested that I move back to Charlotte, and I was just in that point of desperation. And I was like, yeah, there's really nothing keeping me here at this point. So like, let's do it. And so I did move back to Charlotte, and the conditions with my parents were sort of like, you have to stop drinking if you want to be back here and like living with us. And at first I was like, well, I did not sign up for that. I just needed to get out of New York City, and then everything's like totally fine. but it was sort of like I had gotten to the point of no return. And so they pretty much like enforced this rule of no drinking. And I wanted to just white knuckle it. And I just was like, okay, well, I just won't drink, but I'm not going to be happy about it. I'm certainly not going to go to AA, and I'm not going to like do the recovery thing. But after I ended up drinking again, when I moved back home, I was dog sitting and they like left me a bottle of wine. So I drank that. And my parents got really upset because they found out, and because I couldn't lie to my mom. She always knew. And so then they were like, all right, you need to do something. So I started going to AA meetings. And once I was in AA, I was like, well, I've got to get all the steps done, and I've got to like do 90 meetings in 90 days and like be the all-star student at the meetings. And yeah, so I did that my first year of sobriety, and it definitely helped with, the accountability and the things like that. But over time, it just didn't feel like the right fit for me. So I started exploring other resources, and, that kind of, I guess, gets me where I am today.
Well, and I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that, because many of the things you said, I completely related to. In particular, the thing that comes to mind is when you talk about college, like I can remember times exactly. It's like, you'd wake up the next day and it was like laughing with your girlfriends, be like, we don't even remember how we got home. And like at the time, it's like, that's hilarious. And then you look at it with some space in it, you're like, that was fucking stupid. Like, why did we do that? But in the context of where you were, it was so normal, right? Like everyone else, or at least in your social circle were doing the same things. And I think many of us have had those experiences. And something that really resonated with me as well is you mentioned kind of like this slow progression. And I think I can speak from my experience. I think many of us, right? It goes from, you mentioned kind of like college drinking habits to then our 20s. And, we're, I don't know, working in our first jobs and making money. And like you said, it's like so chic to go out and order like your fun drink. And then, but it's kind of reserved for the right, like weekends. And then gradually it's like, well, Thursday's the weekend, and well, Wednesday, we're halfway to the weekend. And sooner or later it creeps up. And alcohol kind of has a place in your life every single day. And I feel like it sneaks up on a lot of us.
Yep.
And I'm wondering from your perspective, because for many of us out there, those high achievers, go, 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 work, motherhood, whatever, we all have very busy, jam-packed lives. For so many of us, that glass of wine at the end of the day is almost like your reward, or like the carrot dangling that gets you through. What are your thoughts around that? Like this kind of like the drink is the reward at the end of the day.
Yeah, that is one of the biggest beliefs that I work with clients on that comes up very often. Is it's either running towards pleasure or avoiding pain is why we use alcohol. So, that's a very general statement, but oftentimes, we believe it will take away some pain. So like kind of numb us out from the stress of the day, or we believe it will give us pleasure and help us to have fun and unwind. And really, it's not necessarily an easy task, but we sort of have to get curious with ourselves and figure out, where did this belief that alcohol is a reward come from, and trace it back, because it's probably been ingrained in us since we were children. Essentially, if our parents drank around us, or it's enforced every single day in the media that like, you deserve a drink, you deserve a cocktail, like mommy deserves her wine. And it's no wonder that that's what you believe. So it's coming up with not only where did the belief come from, but what actually what do I actually need? Like, is it drinking? Is it alcohol? Or is it some sort of relief? Or what am I not looking at? Or what am I not fixing in my life so that my stress level comes down? Like, what am I not addressing? Or what can I add that's actually good for me? So, some replacements that some of my clients will do is going on a walk instead of having that glass of wine. Like a lot of people call it like the witching hour of like 5 o'clock, when like the wine witch comes, and you just do it. You just pour the wine. You don't think twice about it. So coming up with other things to do during that time that give you authentic joy. But primarily it's getting into those beliefs and figuring out like, what do I need right now in this moment? And is that alcohol truly?
I think that so many of us, as we pile on more responsibility in life and get busier, I really feel like we leave parts of ourself behind. And when you say that authentic joy, like I think a lot of the things that represent like play, joy, lightheartedness get replaced with stress. And then we're looking for the quick thing that makes us feel better. And like you said, it's like we equate alcohol as like the conduit for the emotion we're looking to get. So if we don't want to feel sad, we want to feel happy, or we want to feel relaxed, we want to feel chill, whatever. We think that like alcohol is the vessel that gets us there, when really we've lost connection to some of those things, as you mentioned, that like authentically bring us there.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned some like, you know, going on walks, any other things that you have worked with your clients to help them substitute? Because I really do think that's like a great idea of figuring out like what else can you crowd into that time that ultimately like kind of pushes alcohol out.
Yeah, I mean, alcohol is an addictive substance. So that's another thing. Like, it's not an easy task, and it's not going to necessarily be comfortable at first to swap out your wine for your walk. Exercise is always a good one, because not only are you, doing something good for your body, you're also getting those positive neurochemicals that you need when you are kind of resetting the neurochemical balance in your brain. Um, so I love that. And then also there are so many like wonderful alcohol-free drink options out there now. And I very much believe in this placebo effect of having some kind of adult non-alcoholic beverage as a replacement. Oftentimes gives you the same effect, because we're drinking often to feel connected to other people. So if we have a drink that looks like a cocktail, tastes like a cocktail, or looks like a beer, it makes us feel included, and that takes away like that discomfort. So I recommend, finding a non-alcoholic drink you're excited about that also feels like a treat, and there are tons out there. um, Doing something like journaling is also good, like helping you kind of, like I said, with the investigating, like processing your day and kind of releasing what is weighing you down. Like reading a good book, like doing something, watching some dumb reality TV, and like whatever, helps you unwind and isn't gonna like take away from you in the future. Like I always say, it's alcohol is like an easy button. So we just press it and then like hope our problems go away. And like that's not the way that life works, unfortunately. Like nothing can truly just take away your problems if you don't address them. So you drink the glass of wine, but like you're buying that happiness on credit, and you're going to have to pay it back later. And it's going to be a lot pricier than the original payment.
Right. I find myself saying, I don't necessarily have a problematic relationship with alcohol, but I kind of do, in the sense that it's been something that I just kind of do without thought, right? And it's usually like that nightly glass of wine, like tops two glasses, and it becomes so normalized. Like it's almost like it became this trifecta, right? Like I would drink my wine every day. I wake up, I'm compromising my sleep. I'm
Mhm.
feeling, well, maybe not full blown hungover. I'm still not 100% myself.
Mhm.
It spiked my anxiety. It then, right, like I started going into like shame spirals, like all sorts of like yucky things, right? Would you expand a little bit more about the whole like alcohol as a depressant and like why it contributes to kind of the flare up around anxiety, like negative feelings about ourselves, things like that?
Yeah, so it all goes back to I'll try to explain it as simply as possible without getting too like sciencey about it, but basically our body wants to operate at homeostasis. So like everything kind of in harmony, and we naturally produce a balance of those neurochemicals that keep us there. But drugs, and alcohol is a drug, like spike our dopamine artificially. So then our body and our brain wants to get back to that homeostasis. And so it sees, oh, we're producing all this extra dopamine. So I need to produce all this cortisol, which is like the stress hormone, to counteract the excessive dopamine that we have. So then the scale gets tipped sort of in the opposite direction, and we're left with like more of those negative neurochemicals, stress chemicals that produce all of those like hungover feelings the next day. So, when you are feeling, the Monday blues after drinking over the weekend, like that is, your body working on getting back to its set point. And so all of that happens and no one even really knows that. Like, it's not explained to us, it's not really taught to us in school. I didn't know it until I like literally made this into my career, and had my own personal journey with it, because I was just like, I want to know what's going on in my head, what's happening in my body, how does this all work? And I had to do a lot of digging and a lot of work to find this information because it isn't readily shared with us. And I could go on and on because I think it's fascinating that we are kept in the dark, and it is purposeful. Like, it's not convenient for us to shine a light on the unsexy side of alcohol, and that doesn't sell products.
I really appreciate you bringing that in, because it took me, like you said, this information isn't necessarily like readily available to us. And, so much of what I bring to the podcast somehow has a tie to my experience with anxiety. And as soon as I started understanding that connection of alcohol and my anxiety, that was like major light bulb moment, because in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. I don't need to take alcohol out of my life. Like, I'm still going to work. Everything's fine. But it's not fine when you're pulling over on the side of the road and having panic attacks, like more days than not. And for me, alcohol ended up like, I came to find this trifecta between sleep, alcohol, and caffeine, but it took me like 2 years to figure that shit out, So I appreciate you shining a light on what's actually happening to our body. So Molly, I'm really curious, is that, I certainly have started reevaluating my relationship to alcohol and starting to reduce it. And I know I'm starting to see more, whether it's podcasts I've listened to, things I've read about this idea of sober curious or alcohol reduction. Can you tell us more about what that means?
Yeah, you're totally correct. I think I've been asked this before, is there more sober curiosity, or is it, and I don't always know because I'm very plugged into it, but I do believe that there is way more conversation about alcohol reduction and sober curious than there was even when I quit drinking almost 4 years ago. And I think it is because it's becoming more socially acceptable to talk openly about your alcohol use, and more research is coming out about alcohol's effects on us. So we want to be this health conscious society that's drinking our green juice and meditating and doing XYZ, but we can only turn a blind eye to the fact that we are drinking alcohol, which is a drug, is a carcinogen, and we can only do that for so long. We're seeing more celebrities out there that are announcing that they're sober, or they've quit drinking, or they're taking a break, and it's just becoming more celebrated and more empowering. People's role models are doing it. And they're not saying that, I hit this rock bottom and I lost my job, I lost my home, and now I'm in AA and I'm, there's more nuance than there used to be a few years ago. And there's more opportunity to explore your relationship to alcohol without judgment. And that's essentially like why I created Counterculture Club, is it is a way in for people to experiment with an alcohol reduced life and do some of those experiences and things, events they always assumed they needed alcohol to get through or to do. Because through those experiences, you prove to yourself that you can do those things. And not only can you do them, you can have fun doing them. You can make friends as a grown-up without drinking. And that is really validating and empowering. And the more you gather experiences like that, the more confident you are that you don't necessarily need alcohol to enjoy your life and have fun with friends.
And I think too, like what I love about what you're creating through Counterculture is that you've identified that missing like sector in the market, right? Because we have either you have a problem with alcohol, which means like you're a screw up, you're an alcoholic, you've destroyed your life in some capacity.
Your fault.
Or yeah. Or it's like squeaky clean. Like there's that in between, whereas, yes, you're still functioning, but you're choosing to do something different for your life that, for your health, how you feel, how you show up. And I love, what you've shared as far as we are seeing this idea be more mainstream. So tell us a little bit more about counterculture and, some of the things that you do that offer an outlet for connection without alcohol kind of being that driving force that connects everyone.
Yeah, I started the group. It was right before the pandemic, and I started it as a way for me personally to make friends that didn't drink. I wasn't going to any kind of recovery meetings. I had some connections and communities online, but I didn't know any other like non-drinking women in Charlotte. And so I figured if I feel this way, there has to be others that feel the same way. Drinking culture is huge here. I mean, I don't really know anywhere where it's not, but we have like over 60 breweries in the city. And so I just kind of put the call out there. I started a meetup group and posted on Facebook. I already had an Instagram account where I posted about my sobriety. So I just, found a couple of people that wanted the same thing. And it evolved over time to become a membership. We started doing events online, book clubs, weekly share circles where we just get on a call and do a meditation and talk about what's going on in our lives. And I also, during that time, I got my life coaching certification. So now we offer coaching for people looking to change their relationship with alcohol. We also do events. So we do events for the public. We do big happy hours. We do yoga. We're planning to do like a multi-course dinner with mocktails. Like anything is, you can do anything and more without alcohol. So we try to do really diverse kinds of events, from like active events, like workout classes, to just like social fun foodie events. But really, the common denominator is alcohol won't be there. So you don't have to worry about turning down a drink or counting how many drinks you're having, or if people are going to judge you, and you just get to have fun and alcohol is just irrelevant.
It's such a neat way, like you said, just to know that like alcohol isn't even a part of the equation. So it's like you don't even have to worry about it. Because I think that even for someone that's not looking to be, sober, meaning like no alcohol at all, but just even someone who feels like, hey, I just want to know that on a Wednesday night, if I go out to dinner, like tonight's not the night I'm going to have my glass of wine, but you feel the stress of like going to the restaurant and not
Right.
ordering it. Right. So it's neat to know that there's an outlet, right, for events like that it's not even, it's a non-issue there. Um, and I certainly want to, we'll share in the show notes ways that people can connect with you and learn more about counterculture. But something I wanted to come back to is whether it's reflecting on your experience or those of your clients, what are some of the transformations or the biggest differences people are experiencing when they redefine that relationship with alcohol, whether it's completely taking it out or, greatly cutting back on it? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I would say what's been interesting for me to see is that we've had people join that I'd say were in that sober curious camp initially, that are deciding through being in the membership and learning more and reading and educating themselves that alcohol doesn't serve them at all anymore, and just sort of organically removing it from their lives. And they're not going necessarily to a recovery meeting. They're not calling themselves an alcoholic. They're just sort of organically, moving it out and like letting it go. And I just think that's so cool to see, because, I didn't do it that way, but I wish I had like a resource like this when I was looking at alcohol, because for me, it felt like quitting drinking meant taking on this label and being stigmatized. And so I was doing everything I could to cling to alcohol and prove that it wasn't a problem, because if I stopped drinking, then I would be, with the scarlet letter for the rest of my life. And I just like wasn't willing to accept that. I was like too proud or something to like go down that path. But now it's like, instead of saying to yourself, is this problem too big to ignore? It's saying, okay, I'm fine with alcohol, but could I be better without it? And like looking at it from that angle. But in terms of transformations, like the women in the group, in the membership, are just, they're accomplishing huge things in their life, and they're so present, and they're buying houses and starting like new multi-figure jobs, and like have healthy relationships, and they're just doing this incredible like growth and development, and they have this self-awareness and like graciousness and gratitude. And it's incredible to watch, like to be surrounded by people that inspire you in that way. And, not everyone is 100% sober, but they're all on their own journey with it. And like I said, some of them didn't intend to quit drinking. And then that's just sort of like what happened from being surrounded by others doing that. We have a daily gratitude practice where every day we share 5 things that we're grateful for in our lives on our Slack channel. And I started in August as like a 30-day challenge, and it's been almost 6 months and we're still doing it. And I think, they are just like things like that are helping them to rewire their brains and like enjoy life. So they're just wonderful people, and it's awesome to have them in the community.
I hope that anyone out there listening, the whole intention of this conversation is just, I think about myself, I think about the conversations I'm having in my friend groups, and all of us are at a place that we're sort of poking holes in the narrative we have around alcohol of just saying, yes, I enjoy alcohol. However, is it maybe in a place where I'm not necessarily deciding, like it's more so just habitual, or, is it a coping mechanism? Am I really feeling anxious? Like I'm using it as a crutch for something else. And I think you've shared a lot of things, whether it's ideas for replacements, even just us understanding the science of what's going on with alcohol. And, you touched on it in your last response. And I think the question I would want people to really think about is alcohol serving you, right? And it doesn't have to be that it's, preventing you from getting out the door every day, but just, do you like how you feel every day or after you drink alcohol, right? And I feel like that's where you kind of take the power back and decide, is this serving me and is it not? And if it's not, let's get curious around it and figure out what's underneath it, and I think it's a really cool, organization you've started. I love your coaching that you've done. If someone wants to connect with you and learn more, what's the best way to find you?
So they can follow me on Instagram. My handle is at Molly Ruggere. Counterculture Club, we're at counterculture_club on Instagram. And then our website is countercultureclub.org. So on the website, you can sign up to become a member. You can book a free consultation call for coaching. All of that is on our website. So there's plenty of ways to reach me.
Well, I'm so glad we got to connect today. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and your insights. And guys, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. I can't wait to connect with you next week. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for listening to the Wake Up Call podcast. If you liked what you heard today, I would love for you to subscribe and leave a review. It takes just a few minutes and does wonders for helping other people find the podcast. If you want to connect outside of the podcast, you can do so by following at Alicia D. Hopkins on Instagram. And if you really liked the episode you just listened to, do me a favor. Would you screenshot the episode and tag me? I would love to see what's resonating with you. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope today's episode helped you to see that you can wake up to the change that's possible in your life.